being tarred and feathered is not a pleasant experience.
Okay.
But, there's something necessary about that as well, in the course of struggle. There's a certain sense in which the people who attacked Misera have done us a great, great favor
Yeah.
because they've put us on a much bigger runway. And now we've taken off on that runway and are
Yeah.
with a massive jet compared to a biplane that we had maybe a month ago.
Mhm.
And and I think that that's the key to it, like that, we, you know, I remember Owen Harris, when he was advising Mary Robinson on her election campaign back in 1980. He wrote a big document for how to win the election, which was like how to speak, what to say, how to dress, how to stand, all that, and it was brilliant, brilliant. Uh, but there was one occasion when she was invited to do an interview with Hot Press, which had been, I started off the Hot Press interviews many years before. And they had got a terrible reputation for, people would be caught out using bad language, or they would be asked about their sex life. I didn't ask people about their sex life, I don't care, but about their drugs or whatever. And the Labour Party who were sponsoring Robinson were terrified that, she was going to get into trouble. And she went to Harris and she said to Harris, the Hot Press, and he said to her, he says, "You have to get blood on the blouse. You have to get blood on the blouse." And that's the key to it, Rick.
Yeah.
That you have to be prepared to meet these setbacks and meet these challenges. And when you do, as in this case, the people, I have to say, the people, Cliff, Stephen, and Suzanne, the main people behind this,
Mhm.
like they were so determined and so, you know, absolutely unflappable in the face of adversity, right up to the last minute. Like I remember, I
Mhm.
walked in the other night into the Ivy Tower, and I met Stephen in the bar, and he shook hands and he told me, and I said, "Oh, that's bad." He says, "It's okay," and he tapped his phone. There's two calls waiting for me here, from two other companies who will do it. We'll get one. Don't worry. And that's what happened. And you know, so this is it. We got blood on the blouse for a
Mhm.
month, but that's what it takes. That's what you have to do.
To get
And
a few slaps. If you're in a fight, people, when you're in a war or you're in a fight, or if you've been in a fight before, it's very difficult to get to the end of it completely unscathed. You might win, you might lose, but it's highly unlikely that you're not going to take some damage in the meantime. And I think that's another thing people need to be aware of. There is the possibility that you could lose whatever you lose. I think what I'm trying to say is whatever you lose in terms of your perceived reputation among your work colleagues or your family members, it pales into insignificance to what you'll lose if you don't take a stand
well,
against what's
exactly
going
right.
on at the
Yeah,
minute. Do you,
exactly
you
right.
get me?
I mean, I meet people sometimes and say, well, you know, I would be speaking out too, but I have a mortgage. I said,
Yeah,
well, we all had mortgages. We all lost. But yeah, exactly. What are you going to lose if they win?
correct, correct.
If we don't defeat this, we're going to lose everything. So your mortgage will be immaterial.
Irrespective,
Yeah.
if I can finish this particular conversation, you again mentioned a word earlier on, emergence. Okay, not an awakening, an emergence is happening, right? So this whole business of people saying they're awake, I always had an issue with that. In that, being awake means nothing
Yeah.
if you don't couple it with action. So every morning, depending on how your sleep patterns are, you'll wake up in the morning. We both woke up this morning. We both became awake this morning after a night's slumber. Okay.
Yes.
Now, after we awoke, after we had our awakening this morning, if we woke up to the sound of an alarm, we could have switched that thing off and went back to sleep again, or got out of bed, or we could have hit what I call the snooze button, which runs for a period of time. It lets you doze and then it rings again. And depending on how tired you are, you can keep hitting that snooze button, John, and drifting in
Yeah.
and out of consciousness, or you can jump out of bed. So being awake in and of itself is fine. But if you don't couple that awakeness, like in terms of day to day life, if you could lie in bed all day awake, but you don't get anything done or accomplished because you're simply awake, but you're static and you're lying in a horizontal position, not doing much. You have to marry that awakening to action to get a result or to get something productive. Is that maybe where you were coming from when you said about, where an emergence is
Yeah,
happening or something
oh,
is emerging? That
that's
in
right.
itself implies action, and emerging is an active
Yeah,
thing,
definitely. Definitely. Action is the magic word, really. I mean, yes, you were talking about, I mean, in many ways, you could say that the point of our struggle is consciousness raising. In other words, we get people to, we inform them. I mean, that's my book and so on. And we talk and so on. And people sometimes today, oh, this is just talk. Like, why are we doing something? This is talking is doing, in a
Hmm.
sense, Uh, but it's predicated, action is the destination. And action doesn't necessarily mean, getting the gun out attached necessarily.
Hmm.
If you have a gun attached, by all means, and make
Hmm.
sure it's oiled. But at the same time, it could be like I often talk in when I speak publicly, and people ask me this question: what can we do? And ultimately, you can bring this down to a very simple concept. There's a chapter in my book about it, which is something that was said by Václav Havel, the great philosopher and playwright and president of the Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, after the revolution of 1989, the Velvet Revolution. And he talked about the power of the powerless. And by that he meant, well, he described what he meant. He talked about a situation, the greengrocer in Prague who had put a sign into his window during the communist regime. And it said, "Workers of the world unite." So that's kind of like the equivalent of whatever, the far right
Hmm.
are bad, or something. And Havel said, like, clearly the greengrocer doesn't believe this. He doesn't subscribe to this sentiment. Um, he puts it there in order to basically say, protect his ass from the communist tyrants and make sure that they're not on his case. But Havel said that nevertheless, it's not harmless. It's not nothing because it has an effect on other people, other businesses, and they see it and they feel intimidated that they should be doing something similar. And in that way, that's the way that power operates in very subtle ways in order to suppress people's wills and their spirits. And he said the answer to this, therefore, the power of the powerless is simply removing the sign for that group. That's all. And he says, so in each day that you do the things that you're called upon to do, which are maybe minor refusals, but nevertheless cumulatively add
Yeah.
up to a revolution.
Yeah.
That's the power of the powerless. And in fact, in a certain sense, Rick, that's more important than any rising of itself, because that is a rising, because you have no idea if that becomes contagious
Mm.
and everybody does their little part, you get a total refusal
Yeah.
in society, a total no to tyranny. And that's what we need to be moving towards. That's the key to it all. And of course, as Matthias Desmet has said, the most important thing is not to stop, not to give up. That you must continue because that's the way. Even if you think you're not succeeding, you probably are succeeding in something that isn't visible, which is the mitigation or amelioration of cruelty. In other words, the tyrants are less likely to go full Turk on the thing if there is some resistance. For
Mhm.
as long as there is resistance, they would be reluctant to go the full hog. But
Yeah.
once the resistance is gone, you know, then they can do what they please,
You can
and that's something.
steamroller.
Yeah. So I think that's the power of the powerless is probably the secret, ultimately. So that to put it another way to people, there is nothing that you can do that is too small if it is an act of resistance.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a great shouting match in the street. It doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't even have to involve marching with flags.
Mhm.
It can be simply quietly, when instead of putting on that mask, in the situation, for example, of 20 and 21, just put it in your pocket and say no and walk into the supermarket and face whatever consequences. Have the conversation that is necessary. And if it's unpleasant, so be it. It'll pass. And in the morning, you'll wake up and you think, I did good. I
And
did.
could have empowered or inspired or encouraged someone else to do that. And then one
Yes.
becomes two, becomes four, becomes eight, becomes 16, 32, 64. Multiply that up a few times and you're into the thousands. And I think that's the key too. It can't be left down to a small minority of people to carry this. This has to be a mass emergence and a mass awakening, but not necessarily to do militant things and not everybody's called to do the same thing.
Well,
But if everybody's playing their part, John, even albeit perceivably small and insignificant in their eyes, everything counts.
well, that brings us again back to Miss Era. And the way I judge things a lot of the time in terms of progress from our point of view, I just asked myself the question, could this have happened in the summer of 2020, in the summer of 21? I can remember those times.
Yep.
And in fact, my book, you can trace yourself in the book to a particular time because there's a list of events in between the chapters. But that and the answer is no. I actually don't think this would have even
No.
possible a year ago. Now, what's different here is that you have 1,000 people in a building, and it's just, it could have been 3,000, by the way, or four, because the number of people who are looking for tickets in the end. So next year, Ms. Era is going to be Woodstock
Mhm.
2026. Not necessarily, it won't be called that, but it'll be called Miss Era. But it'll be that's the status we're going to now.
Mhm.
But here's the point: that everybody there was speaking the same language,
Yeah.
the same heart language. They knew everything that was happening to them, and they knew the implications, and they had nothing to tell each other than to share their sympathy and their love with each other. And that means that we have reached a certain critical mass, because that is an emblematic group of Irish people. And I believe that if you were to remove today the corruption from the top, the layer of corruption, which is represented by the so-called press, the media, the political corruption, the judicial corruption, the medical, scrape all that stuff away, you would find that about 80 to 90% of the population had been awake, so to speak,
Mhm.
for quite a long time.